Welcome back to the DNA Pest Control Podcast with your host, Daniel. How's it going, all my fellow technicians? I hope everyone's been having a great 2021 so far. Everything's been crazy over here. If you guys haven't heard my stories, you can go back and listen to the first couple episodes of this year. It's been a pretty crazy year. And we just got our truck back that we haven't had for 30 days because of supposed to be a simple fix, and ended up turning into a month-long and a very costly repairs, which has been pretty crazy. But today I wanted to let everyone know some of the upcoming things that I'm going to be doing. So I am going to go over a series of general pests. I know last year we kind of went over a few different pests and how to treat and what to do, but I really want to go a little bit more in depth and even more in depth in the future. But over the next couple of weeks, I'm going to be going over ants, bed bugs, cockroaches, bees and wasps, and rodents, okay? So I am going to do this as a general sense, okay? I want to give you a decent idea of if there's multiple species, what are the most common species? 1 in California, 2 in the U.S. Also, I want to talk a little bit about the biology. I think it's very important for a technician to know the insect that they're coming up against. If you don't know the insect and you don't know what you're dealing with, you typically have a lot of issues. So I'm going to go over biology, and then I'm going to be going over control, and of course a few fun little facts that we'll be going over as well, just to kind of give you something stupid to talk about, right? Because a lot of these people don't actually care about all of these things. But for us, we need to know. So today is going to be a start of this awesome series. And what are we going to be talking about? Well, we're going to be talking about ants. So the most common ant or ants in California, and surprisingly in the U.S., which I was a little shocked. I thought I was going to get quite a bit of different ones. But the most common ones that us technicians deal with are the Argentine ant, the Doria's house ant, velvety tree ant, and carpenter ant. I know, I didn't say them all, and I'm not going to. And the reason why I'm not going to say every single ant that we may possibly see is because there's over 13,000 species of ants, okay? In California alone, there was like a list of 100 that I could have read off, and the dates of the sightings of each one. I'm just not going to do that. So I just wanted to go over the basic ones that we typically deal with on a day-to-day basis. You know, I don't deal with imported red fire ants ever, but in the state of California, you have to learn that. And you have to learn how to identify it in case you come up against it. So, do I? No. But do I still have to learn that? Yes. And no, I'm not going to go over all of them. So, moving on, okay? So, ants are social insects, okay, that live in colonies. If you guys do not know what a social insect is, or when they live in colonies, we are going to go over that, okay? So these social creatures can actually live in as small as 12, which I'm not exactly sure which species that is. I don't think we deal with them. But up to millions, I should say. That is ridiculous to think about how many ants there could be in a colony. Ants, along with bees and wasps, are members of the order, and I'm going to murder this word, I know, so feel free to make fun of me, because I'm okay with that. The Notera, and undergo complete metamorphosis, passing through 4 stages. If you are a branch 2 technician in California, you better know what a complete metamorphosis is and an incomplete metamorphosis. Okay? Those outside of the state of California, I don't know what you have to learn, but I will hurry and cover those 2 things. So a complete metamorphosis is an insect completely changing, okay? Meaning they go from egg, larva, pupa to adult, okay? An incomplete metamorphosis, like earwigs, they molt, or spiders, they molt and they gradually get bigger, okay? So they stay the same, they're just little babies, and then they get into big, nasty adults. Okay? So that's kind of the difference between a complete metamorphosis and just a metamorphosis or incomplete metamorphosis. Now, the interesting thing about ants is there's 3 types of adults typically. Okay, there's a couple more, but we'll just go over. There's 3 types of adults: queens, males, and workers. Okay, we all know what the queens are. Queens are the ones that are making the eggs. The males are the ones that are helping fertilize these eggs and making those babies. Okay? And then the workers. Workers are typically females. Okay? Surprise, surprise. Now, a little bit about this. This is actually really crazy with the ants. So, to determine, it's not like us, we make a baby, and guess what? We don't get to choose the sex. We don't get to decide if it's going to be a male or a female. That's not up to us. But ants get to choose this. Interesting, right? Yeah, pretty crazy. So ants are actually, depending on what they feed the young, is what it's going to be, which is nuts to think about. So they're actually deciding, okay, we need so many female workers. Boom, female workers come out. Oh, we need a couple more males because they died in a couple weeks. Boom, a couple more males. They know this, okay? So it's nuts how they communicate, which they communicate, if you guys didn't know, they communicate with pheromones. Okay, I'm going to throw up a ton of information about these things, okay? So pheromones are important to know, because when you kill an ant, that pheromone, depending on the colony, will release, or they secrete a liquid or a smell that other ants will pick up, and they'll take it as an attack, which then calls ants from even further distances from the colony itself to come and help and attack. There's an attack, okay? That's some species. All species typically, other than like one in Brazil, and they use their eyes to hunt, but all other than this Brazilian ant, they all lay pheromones to food, okay? So when you see these scouter ants, which a lot of people will say, they're looking for food, they're looking for water, and when they find it, on their way back, they lay a stronger scent of pheromones saying, hey, this is the quickest way. And then as ants follow that trail to the food or the water source, and they come back, they find it, and they successfully, as they're coming back, then they lay a pheromone, okay? So they're not laying they are laying a pheromone to the food, but the different type of pheromone is when they're coming back after they found the food. So if you're a technician, you're baiting for these ants, and you're baiting a trail that is just a single ant, and they haven't successfully found food yet, you actually may not get as many ants as you think, because the ant is only going in one direction until it finds food. And you may not even have another ant on that trail following that other ant ever until it comes back with a food source. So we'll get into control later, but that just is a little tip if something has never worked. If you placed bait and it didn't work, that may be the reason why. The ant ended up making a giant circle around it, never came in contact with your bait, never set off that pheromone, because the pheromone is only laid when it's going back to the nest after they successfully found the food. Okay, and then every ant after that just reapplies that pheromone, okay, making the scent really, really strong until it's out of food, Once it's out of food, they stop going there because no successful ants are coming back and laying more pheromones. The scent dissipates. No more pheromone, no more ant trail. Okay? So, interesting thing about pheromones. Also, this is another thing I just learned. Queens, when they're about to die or they're done being a queen, okay, which, fun fact, queens can live up to 30 years in some species of ants. Nuts. 30-year-old queen. Dang, that's crazy. And that's a ton of babies. I could only imagine. Yeah, massive respect, okay, for women, especially a female having babies for 30 years. That's crazy. But they can live up to 30 years. And when they're done, they emit a pheromone that tells the workers that are taking care of these eggs and larvae and everything that they need to produce another queen. And so then depending on how they're feeding this, they prep the next queen, which is nuts, okay? Also, some things that technicians don't know, and I actually knew this, but I didn't know this at one point, and so hopefully I'm blowing some people's minds. Ants can have multiple queens. And everyone might say, well, duh, of course they can have multiple queens. Okay, let me throw one more at you. Did you know that they can even not have a queen? There are colonies of ants without queens, guys. That's nuts. Those are actually called gamergates, which can reproduce for the colony. So they will have a bunch of these non-queen females that can reproduce still, but they're not considered a queen ant, okay? But moving back, because I think the Argentine ant has multiple queens. Give me just a minute. I'm going to double check on that because I really want to make sure that I'm giving you the right information about the Argentine ant. Let me see here. Great thing about technology, guys, is you can Google it. Okay, so I was correct. So a single Argentine ant colony will have several queens, each of them capable of laying as many as 60 eggs per day. Wow, that's a ton of ants. Argentine ant queens help workers by feeding their young. At times, due to temperature or colony pressures, the Argentine ant will leave her nest without taking flight and establish a new nest. Okay, so that is that's actually a big thing with a lot of these colony species, even bees and wasps, which we'll get into on another episode, is they actually separate and create their own colonies. But the Argentine ants have multiple queens, which means if you have Argentine ants in your area, which the Argentine ant is one of the most common ants in the U.S., as well as California, depending on how you treat, you may just be pushing one ant. You're just killing an ant queen, but you're not actually killing all of the queens. And so then you keep having callbacks. If this is you, you know what ant you're dealing with. It's the Argentine ant. And so you need to do a little bit better, which we'll get into. Okay, so kind of interesting. Or possibly you just have gamergates and you don't even have a queen ant, which is actually really interesting because then you got to kill a colony. You got to make sure you kill all the gamergates and not just one. So really interesting thing. But another interesting thing is that the larvae out of ant colonies are the only part of the metamorphosis stage that the ants can actually break down solids, okay? So if you've ever noticed, majority of ants will carry food back to a colony, or they will suck up the liquid and they'll bring that back to the colony, right? So when they're bringing back solid foods, they're actually feeding this to the larva. The larva is actually eating it. And then what they do is they actually, when they poop, I'll just make it simple terminology. When they poop, it's actually a liquid. And then the other ants will actually eat that and they'll use that for food. So, guys, if you've ever heard of Niban, Niban's a great way to take care of ants. Niban's a solid, okay? It's a dry bait. If you've ever heard of dry bait, that means it's not a liquid bait. It doesn't come in a tube. It's not a gel. You don't squirt it all over the place. Okay, you sprinkle this stuff. Ants take that back and feed that to the larvae, which turns into a poison liquid, which then gets fed to the queen and then kills the colony. So really interesting, right? Really interesting on the biology of these things. So something good to know is that exact thing. You need to use multiple resources to take out full colonies of ants. All right, moving on to the next thing. So, let's see here. Okay, so now going over, I think I covered all the biology. I just want to make sure, guys. Oh, real quick. Okay, so ants, they actually have a social stomach. Okay, what is that? That means they all hold their own, they hold their own food, but they also share food. So when they have a social stomach, they're actually passing food to each other. Just like if you've ever sat through a Termidor presentation or an Alpine WSG presentation, they're going to go over and how they kind of, once one touches the product and then they'll touch other ants and then it starts spreading throughout the colony that way because they're all touching each other and they're all crawling over each other. That's the same concept with the social stomach. They're all sharing food between each other. So when you're using a liquid bait or even a dry bait, they're going to eat that poison and then they're going to start passing it to each other. Obviously, our main goal is to get it to the queen, to wipe the queen out. But if it's in a situation like the Argentine ant, you have multiple queens, which means you need to really rely on that social stomach to pass enough poison to get to every queen, to make sure we're getting everybody. Which, when it comes down to control, that is actually one of the main things that I think a lot of technicians overlook when it comes to ants and ant species. Is we go in as this PMP, we go in, chest puffed out, ants, Termidor, we're just going to wipe them out if they come in contact with it. Another fun little fact is, if you guys didn't know, why Termidor works so well is they also clean each other every time they go into the nest. So they'll usually have workers cleaning other workers as they're coming into the nest. Which then ingests the poison, which then turns around and kills that species because they are creating food. As they're cleaning each other, they're using that as a social stomach. Now they're part of that social stomach. But the other thing is a lot of these chemicals are not meant for a quick knockdown. Okay, any newbies out there, you'll hear the word knockdown a lot. Okay, knockdown is the speed of kill. How fast are we killing the ants? If you're using a product like Essentria, nothing against Essentria or those eco-friendly products, but those products kill actually surprisingly fast, which is a good thing, but it's also a very bad thing in the case of ants, because if you're killing the ants before they can make it back to the colony, they never ingest any poison, which then never turns around and kills anything important at least. And so then the ant colony just keeps on reproducing. You keep having callbacks. You're dealing with the same situation over and over and over. Okay. So when someone says, hey, I have an issue with ants, I instantly assume, okay, if I spray, I have to spray all the cracks and crevices. I got to spray the foundation. I got to spray around the windows. I got to spray everywhere, and I'm choosing my product wisely. I'm using Phantom. I'm using Termidor. I'm using Alpine. Here we have Taurus as well. I've heard IGRs work, but I never actually used an IGR with ants. I never really had the need to. But I have heard IGRs work really well with ants as well. But you have so many different products to use from that, choose that product wisely, but then make sure you're spraying it where you need to spray it. Make sure you're putting that where it needs to be put. Or you could completely miss the ants and then you don't have it. Also, for the control part of it, when it comes to ants, is you need to use multiple resources. Okay, no, and I'm not saying don't go and get Termidor, spray Termidor, then grab Alpine, and then go spray Alpine, and then go grab bifenthrin, and then go spray that. That's not what I mean. What I mean is you need to use dry baits. Okay, you need to go through and sprinkle Niban through gardens where they could possibly be either most likely or where they're spotted. You need to go through and you need to use the liquid Advion ant gel. I really like it. Awesome results. Make sure it's fresh. If you have any old stuff, it's not going to work. Just throw it away. Unfortunately, I don't think that shelf life's very long. But the new stuff, it's just fresh out of the box. Boom. I mean, it takes hold and it wipes them out quick. But once again, you got to use all of your resources. You take out one queen out of an Argentine colony. Well, you didn't do anything. You're just pushing those ants, or it makes it seem like you're pushing those ants. But all you're doing is now instead of in the kitchen, they're in the bedrooms. Well, good job. You killed one colony, but you didn't get rid of the whole issue here. So it's better to go above and beyond and make sure that you're covering every basis other than just taking care of it, which the ag department might be actually against, because then they say, hey, well, you're using way more chemical than you should. But it makes sure that we're taking care of the colony and the species. You may need to get creative and use a dust on top of that in wall voids, around electrical, around piping that's going into walls, things like that, to make sure that we are stopping that. And not in all cases does that actually work. I've used dust in carpenter ant situations, and it failed horribly. I had call back. I had to go back and actually do a different treatment. So you just have to make sure that you are exhausting all of your resources to make sure you're taking care of ants. Some of those guys have been super lucky, and they're probably like, yeah, right. Every time I go, I just go spray heavy. That's our go-to word, huh? When we go knock on a door. Oh, thanks, Mrs. Smith. I'll just spray extra heavy today. Yeah, that doesn't work. Ever. I say it, but I actually go in and use different products to make sure I take care of the situation. So then they just say, oh, well, make sure you spray extra heavy. The other guy did, and it worked really well. I did not just spray heavy, guys. I actually used different product. I used my head, my brain. But cracks and crevices are a massive thing. Go find gardens. Go look around the foundation of homes. You'd actually be very surprised. A lot of the times you'll find the trail, which is a pheromone trail, going right into the kitchen from the outside, which you can bait, you can spray. Now make sure you're using scentless products. Fun little fact, okay? And this is, if you're going to take a branch 2 test in California, this is actually on the test. Hope I don't get in trouble for it. No, I didn't cheat. So, but this is something that's on the test, is the pharaoh ant is one, if you use a scented product, it will actually make the infestation worse. So what happens is it sets off an alarm, and that scented product lets them know, hey, this is poison. And they freak out and they go everywhere. So then you're going to have a massive callback and someone's super pissed off because you didn't take care of the issue. Okay? Also, one other thing is Alpine, Termidor, Taurus, Phantom, all these wonderful products that are scentless products, okay? Back to the knockdown, newbies. Knockdown needs to be controlled when it comes to control for ants, okay? And this is a massive one that a lot of people overlook. Oh, you have ants? I'm going to put extra product in here, and I'm not going to tell anybody about it. I'm just going to make it super strong. Guys, that does not mean it's going to kill them any faster or it's going to make it even better. It could actually make it negative. Once you put in too much of a product, there's a smell to it. If you've ever opened up a bottle and you've caught a whiff of a smell, some of these scentless products are scentless when they're diluted at the ratio that's on the bottle. If you go too much, there's a scent, and now you're defeating the purpose of the product. Okay, that's one reason. Second reason is, okay, you up the product. There's no scent. Congratulations. But now you're killing the ants too fast. I've had a guy do this. He put too much Alpine in a B&G, sprayed an ant trail, killed them all. Ants still there. They still came back. They were still inside the house. They kept infesting. They kept doing their thing because he killed all the ants before they could actually make it back to the colony. And he could never actually wipe out the colony. We did get control over it, of course, but lesson learned, so you don't go more than what the bottle says. I know we think more is better. More is not always better if you don't know the product or you don't understand, okay? This is a big one for those newbies and possibly for those 20, 30, 40, 50, 60, 70, 80-year-old vets in the game where they just went super heavy on that DDT and just took care of it. It's different. It's different now. It doesn't work all the way. We follow the label for a reason. And sometimes you can go a little bit heavier and it will work. But if you go too much or if you go too little, you could actually hurt yourself, okay? So if you're that guy who's the owner who's like, I need to save every penny. I'm going to not put anything in this. I'm just going to put the bare minimum. You actually may be doing yourself a disservice and creating a ton of callbacks, which is going to cost you a ton of money because now you're just triple, quadruple spraying a house that you don't need to because you're not using enough. So make sure that you're following that label and you're doing the correct thing when it's coming down to control and treatment, okay? Next thing, you may get somebody that calls and they don't have ants inside the house. They have it back by a garden, okay? There's a lot of products that say you can't spray around gardens. Niban works around gardens. You can actually sprinkle that through the garden. It's okay. You can sprinkle that around it. It's actually very controlled. It's dry. Don't be afraid to use a dry bait. And if anyone's ever said it doesn't work, they're crazy. We've had great success with it, and it's one of our go-tos. The other thing is if you can put it in a kind of a more hidden area where an outside source can't find it, you could even use a liquid bait in those areas. They actually sell these little plastic trays that clip down and seal. Not 100%, obviously, for ants to get in, but you can actually put gel bait inside of it, and even even Niban. You could put both of it inside, and you could set those around a garden area, and you're not actually infecting anything, and you just need to go back in a couple of days and pick them up, or the ants will just clean it for you. So be very creative when it comes to these species, okay? Be very creative on what you need to use and how you need to use it and where you are spraying. Just spraying everything and soaking everything sometimes actually doesn't work. Okay, ants burrow underground, so they may be coming through the foundation and spraying the outside heavy. isn't actually going to work at all. You're going to have to go inside and do an interior treatment, or possibly place out bait, the liquid bait inside the house, or things like that. One thing that I love doing is I love coaching my clients. So when I go out there to do an ant treatment, I let them know, especially if I'm using a liquid bait, I let them understand, okay, ready? I'm going to place out this bait. This bait is going to bring a ton of ants. Remember, going back to the biology of them and the pheromones, okay? Excuse me. So the pheromones, right, they're going to start telling other ants to bring everybody over here. I found food, okay? And so that's going to bring a massive amount of ants, and a lot of people get really scared. They wipe them all up. They throw them all away. And the ants never make it back with the bait, which then they just keep having issues. So you got to educate your clients that you're going to see a ton of ants, and that's okay. That's the whole purpose of it. Because the more ants we see, the more that's going to take that bait, the more that goes back into the social stomach, more likely we're going to kill the queen or possibly queens or gamergates. So you need to make sure that you're educating your clients on that, okay? So quick recap, okay? Most common ants: Argentine ant, Adori's house ant, velvety tree ant, carpenter ant. There's a lot more. Those are the most common. Okay, there are more than 13,000 species of ants, guys. So there's a ton. Don't try to memorize them all. They'll give you a headache, and you'll probably forget them before you can memorize them all. Also, remember, ants go through a complete metamorphosis: egg, larva, pupa, adult. There's queens, males, and workers. Okay, they have a social stomach. Okay, it's very important, and they can have multiple queens. So don't just spray or treat one single area of a home, especially if you don't know which ant you're dealing with, which in the state of California, you're supposed to magically know everything that you're treating for. Unfortunately, we don't. We know they're ants, so we need to make sure that we cover majority of our bases, okay? Also, when it comes to treatment, make sure you are covering all areas: outside, garden area, inside. Look through cabinets. Try to find a trail. It's very important. Also, use up all your resources. There's baits, there's dry baits, there's liquid baits, scentless products, IGR, which is an insect growth regulator. Use everything that you can to make sure that you're wiping out the entire colony so you don't create yourself a headache in the future, okay? Thank you, everybody, for listening to this mini series on ants. Hopefully in the future, I will get a little bit more in depth on each ant species, and we'll go a little bit further on each and every single one. But for as of right now, ants are going to be an issue this summer, and it's coming up quick. We're already creeping up on, we're actually in February. Oh my gosh. We're already a month into 2021, so get ready for ant season. It's already hitting now because it's raining here in Sacramento, California, which brings out ants. The flooding pushes them into houses. And then soon it's going to get really, really hot, which is going to make even more come into houses. So be prepared, get your products in line, and go ant hunting. Thanks for listening, everybody. If you have any questions, concerns, comments, you know where to leave them. Also, don't forget to send us messages and follow us on Instagram at DNA Pest Control Podcast. Thanks, everybody, and have an awesome day.